Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for EarthEcho's STEMExplore Virtual Career Connection, featuring Nury Molina, PhD student and Dr. Nancy Foster Scholar at NOAA and the University of California in Santa Barbara, California. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you joining us tonight. My name is Casey, Programs Manager at EarthEcho International. Here at EarthEcho, we're proud to work with an outstanding group of young leaders who belong to our Youth Leadership Council. These inspiring young people help drive our work here at EarthEcho to empower their own peers around the globe to take an active role in protecting our planet. We are so pleased to have one of our exceptional Youth Leadership Council members here with us tonight. His name is Dimitri, and he's going to help me moderate tonight's live event. So just to give you a little introduction, Dimitri is from Tampa, Florida. He, along with his brother, founded their own environmental protection initiative called Green Gasparilla, which has the goal of targeting a specific source of plastic pollution resulting from the Gasparilla Parade, which takes place each year in Tampa, Florida. So, Dimitri, we're happy to have you. Go ahead and say your hello, and let's get started.
Great, thank you, Casey. We are so excited to have students from all over the globe joining us as we learn about exciting and sustainable careers in science, technology, engineering, and math. This live event is part of STEMExplore, EarthEcho's program that brings inspiration to life by telling the stories of dynamic female professionals in STEM careers during live virtual career connections. We want to thank our founding sponsor, United Technologies, for their support of women in STEM. Here at EarthEcho, we believe that youth have the power to change the planet. Visit earthecho.org to learn more about our programs. You can also access resources like STEMexplore's career profile videos, as well as tune in for upcoming live events just like this one. I'd like to recognize and thank STEMexplore's partner sites across the country and recognize those joining us today. Let's get a hello from our friends in California at the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Clarita. Hello, everyone. It's so great to have you join us today. We also want to give a warm welcome to everybody who is tuning in to our live streams. Just a reminder that you can send in questions. Oops. Sorry. Let me start over. Just a reminder that you can send in questions for our STEM expert via chat, and we will break throughout today's presentation to see if you have any questions. Feel free to start typing questions into the chat space on YouTube or in the Zoom feed. We'll be sure to answer those questions as we go along. Now let's get started. I want to welcome our special guest for EarthEcho's STEMexplore Virtual Career Connection, Nury Molina. Hello, Nury.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk with everyone today.
Yeah, it's so great that to have you here with us. So a little introduction about Nury. Nury received a BS in environmental science with a minor in conservation biology from UCLA, where she worked in Dr. Peggy Fong's lab, examining the preferences of herbivorous fish species for different algal species in Moria, French Polynesia. As a NOAA Dr. Nancy Foster Scholar, she will complement her research on coral reefs in the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa with reefs in Moria. Her PhD research will focus on herbivorous fish and how their consumption of algae contributes to coral reef resilience. Nury, why don't you tell us more about what you do?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. So like you mentioned, I am a first-year PhD student at UC Santa Barbara in the Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Biology department in Dr. Darren Bergepil's lab. So I get to work in amazing coral reef ecosystems. And most of my work has been done in Moria, French Polynesia, which is an island in the South Pacific. So on the picture on the left, we can see where Moria is in relation to where I did my undergrad at UCLA. So it's about a 9-hour flight from LA. And as scientists, we get to stay at a research station owned by UC Berkeley. And this is an amazing opportunity to meet and collaborate with scientists from all over the world that want to work at these coral reef ecosystems in Moorea. And the reason why I study coral reefs is because of their incredible importance. So coral reefs are home to 25% of the world's marine species, and millions of people depend on them, especially those living along coastal communities. So people depend on coral reefs for food, income through fisheries, income through ecotourism. Coral reefs even protect the coastlines through absorbing energy from storms. But worldwide, many coral reefs are declining in health rapidly. And some coral reefs are even shifting to being dominated by coral. And just go back in the previous slide to being covered by algae. And when we lose corals, we lose the functions they provide for wildlife and for humans. And this shift is occurring due to factors like overfishing, nutrient pollution, often from agricultural practices from the land, and this runs off into the water, and this allows algae to overgrow and outcompete the corals. So usually there actually is a balance of coral and algae. So coral and algae compete with each other for space. And there are some fish that eat algae. So by eating algae, the fish creates space for the corals to grow. So fish play a really important part in this coral reef ecosystem in maintaining that balance. So the focus of my PhD research will be focusing on the role of fish and helping coral reefs resist and recover from stressful events and thus be resilient. So we can kind of think of resiliency like a rubber band, which is stretched out, but it bounces back. So coral reefs around the world have different species of coral, different species of fish, different amounts of fish, and they go through stressful things like overfishing, nutrient pollution, climate change. And what I'm trying to focus on is trying to understand the particular role that fish play in helping coral reefs being able to bounce back from those really stressful events. So most of my work is done underwater as opposed to doing experiments in a lab. And this is a really great way for us to be able to see the interactions that are happening in the coral reef right now. And you can see in these pictures, my dive bunny and I, we have what's called dive slates, and they have pencils attached. So we can actually take notes while underwater, while we're doing our experiments. But with field work, brings its own challenges. We can't control nature, but it creates a really dynamic and exciting place to work.
Great. All right. That's so cool. All right. Now let's check in with our interactive sites to see if they have any questions. Boys and Girls Club of Santa Clarita, what questions do you have for Nury?
We have 3 questions so far. So the first question was, have you discovered any new species?
That's a great question. Currently, I think we haven't found a ton of new species. A lot of corals, their genome has been sequenced, but we're still learning so much about them. And actually, we're still learning so much about little organisms that live inside corals. So there are still a lot of new things we're figuring out. That was a great question.
Great. All right. Next question.
How many places have you been to study coral reefs?
So I've been to Moorea, French Polynesia, and I've actually also been to Australia.
Very cool. You say you have one more question?
What colors do you like, Nury?
Ooh, my favorite color is pink, actually.
Do we have any other questions for her right now? Yes, Lynette.
Has she found any tracks of new species?
Have you found any tracks of new species?
So have I found any tracks of new species? So I'm currently not in the search of looking for new species. It's really hard when you're out in the field sometimes to be able to differentiate between species, and so that's a lot of lab intensive work.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Yes, Danica.
How long has she been studying coral reefs?
How long have you been studying coral reefs?
So actually only 2 years. I barely started studying coral reefs 2 years ago. So it's still a very new thing to me and very exciting.
Any other questions? Yes.
How old are you?
I'm 22.
How old are you? Young.
All right.
What-
Great questions, everybody. So I think now we're going to get back to talking with Nury.
Yes.
Nury, can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so currently a project I recently started is looking at the role of fish in their response to a coral bleaching event. So earlier this year in Moorea, French Polynesia, there was abnormally warm water, and this caused a lot of corals to bleach, which is when they turn white because they get rid of this really tiny algae that lives inside of them because they're so stressed. And when they're bleached for too long, they can die. And this gives other algae the opportunity to grow over it. So on the picture on the left, we see a coral that's gone through bleaching. It's white, but it also has this fuzzy brown green stuff growing over it, which is actually algae. So this is a signal that the coral has died, because if it was alive, it wouldn't have allowed the algae to grow over it. So what I'm doing is I'm tagging these corals. You can see on the picture on the right, I'm actually tying a piece of this green flagging tape with a number on them. And I'm putting video cameras out there so I can film them from several hours. And in order to look at what's going on, what algae are growing over these dead corals, are fish eating the algae? If so, what species of fish? How are they eating it? And ultimately, how are the fish able to help coral reefs recover after a bleaching event?
Very cool. So what are some options for someone who wants to take the same career path as you, Nury?
Mm-hmm. So I'll just start off with talking about some of the work that's kind of leading me along the career path I want to do. So I have a fellowship through NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And with this fellowship, I'm going to be able to apply some of the same questions I'm asking in Moorea, but in a national marine sanctuary. So the US has 13 national marine sanctuaries, and they work with the public, federal officials, the state, and other local stakeholders to conserve these ecosystems, but also allow compatible commercial activities like fishing and recreational activities. So this really aligns well with my goals, with my research being applied. So through the sanctuary, I'll be able to provide research needed for management decisions. And I'm proposing to do work soon in the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa.
Great. So what sort of got you started in the marine science field? How did you get interested in this kind of research?
Yeah, so I grew up in Southern California in Oxnard, Ventura County. My parents are immigrants from El Salvador. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of chances to be in the environment, engage in hands-on science. But I remember in 6th grade, I had this science camp and I loved it. But it wasn't until high school where my teacher from my environmental science AP class took us out to the Channel Islands, and we helped in native plant restoration. So what we did was we would take out plants that didn't belong there and plant ones that did belong there. And this ignited my passion to pursue environmental science because I wanted to be in a field where I would be learning about the natural world, but also learning how to conserve it.
Very cool. So what advice would you give to students who might be interested in getting into this field here?
Yeah, so I'll just talk about kind of how I got started into this field first. So I eventually went on to go to undergrad at UCLA, and just speaking on that experience, being a first generation college student, my parents didn't go to college. So often applying to college can be a time where you'll have to forge your own path. So I just want to point out to people that during this process, don't question your worth. Because I know what it's like to go through that. So eventually I went on to do my undergrad at UCLA, majoring in environmental science and minoring in conservation biology. And this was the perfect combination for me because I wanted to use my science to inform conservation decisions. So while at my first year at UCLA, I volunteered for an organization called Reef Check. So I would do things like go snorkeling and collect invertebrates and bring it back to this touch tank we had at the office. I was involved in field trips. I would take middle school students from Los Angeles, take them out on boats. And after this, I wanted to get involved in research. So I applied to this program called the Diversity Project. And this program brings minority students out to Maria, French Polynesia to do research in coral reefs. And this program is really amazing because a lot of us came from backgrounds where it would have been really hard to get involved in marine science and especially go scuba diving. So this program really changed the lives for a lot of us. And so this introduction to coral reef research was a really amazing experience. So during our first 2 weeks, we got first our open water certification and then a special scientific diving certification, which is a certification you actually need to do research underwater. So after this, we spent the next 6 weeks doing a research project involving combination of free diving and scuba diving. And it was a very intense couple of 6 weeks, but after this, I realized that I wanted to keep pursuing doing coral reef research because I saw, first of all, how amazing coral reefs are and how important they are to us, but also how vulnerable they are to so many different stressful things. So that's why it's led me to what I'm pursuing in grad school, because I want to learn how to protect these amazing ecosystems.
Very cool. So here at EarthEcho, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. Nury, can you tell us about how your job contributes to a sustainable future?
Yeah, so before I go into talking about sustainable future, there are so many different jobs you can do that can contribute to a sustainable future. So I've made a list of just a few of those jobs that I found recently being listed. So many people after their PhD will do what's called a postdoc. And a postdoc is about like 3 to 4 years of some more intense research. And the one I found listed was through NOAA. Or if you really love science, but you want to be more involved in communicating the science, you can be a science communication specialist, which is really important. Or if you want to combine your love of science, but with economic solutions, you can do that. You can be a science consultant. You can work in the Parks and Wildlife Department. You can be a director of a marine laboratory. You can be a program administrator, and you can even be a faculty at a university where you can have your own lab and have grad students and do research, or you can focus more on the teaching aspect. So I just wanted to give you this really diverse list to show you there are so many different things you can do with a degree in marine biology.
Very cool. So now I think we are ready to go back and see if anyone has any questions. So let's check in with the Boys and Girls Club again. Do you guys have any questions for Nury?
We do. So first question comes from Serenity and is, do you ever get dizzy after scuba diving?
Do I ever get dizzy after scuba diving? No, I haven't actually had that experience. Yeah, there are a lot of different safety measures, you know, when you're scuba diving and, you know, keeping yourself hydrated. So luckily, I've never experienced that.
Next question is from Sophia, and it's, what type of animals do you see when you are in the ocean, and have you ever seen a shark?
Yes, so I get to see a lot of amazing animals. Sometimes when I'm out doing my experiments, a lot of animals are really curious. So I have had sharks just like swimming around me, very curious. Some places you see bigger sharks, some places you see smaller sharks, you might see octopus. I see a lot of fish. Sometimes if you look really closely in the corals, there's actually really tiny invertebrates like crabs, lots of different amazing sea creatures. I've also seen stingrays. Every time I've gone in the water, I always see something that I've never seen before. It's really amazing.
And from Sophie again, how about dolphins?
So I've seen dolphins when I'm out on a boat going out to my field site. I haven't seen them when I'm actually in the water scuba diving, but we do see them often when we're in transit on the boat.
And what's your favorite animal thus far that you've seen in the ocean? Question from Lacey.
One of my favorite animals I've seen, I think, is a sea turtle. When I was in Australia, I saw a lot of turtles, and I was actually in this place where it was around like 5 or 6 p.m. and all these turtles were just clustered in one spot. They seemed to be sleeping, and it was such a cool and amazing experience.
Question from Liz. When did you first go scuba diving?
So I first went scuba diving 2 years ago when I did this program through UCLA called the Diversity Project. So through that program, I got both my open water certification and then my scientific diving certification.
And from Danica, have you ever encountered any dangerous fish or mammals?
Dangerous. Well, I've never been in what I would call a dangerous situation. I think a lot of times from movies and stuff, you know, a lot of us are afraid of sharks, but really there's no reason, for example, for them to attack humans. And I've never been in dangerous situations.
Did you visit the Great Barrier Reef?
I did go to the Great Barrier Reef. That was actually, as a kid, that was one of my lifelong dreams. So when I experienced that through a study abroad program, it was amazing.
We have one more question coming in. Have you ever what?
Has she ever seen like any hurt animals?
Oh, have you seen any hurt animals?
Hurt animals, that's a good question. Lucky enough, I actually haven't seen hurt animals. A lot of times when you do see an animal in distress, there are special numbers to call where people who are actually trained can help these animals, whether they're stuck either in fishing line or something. There are people trained out there to do that, but I personally haven't seen any hurt animals.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have so far.
Okay, thank you. Those are great questions.
All right.
I just want to jump in and see if Dimitri, our moderator, has any questions for Nury, because In the beginning, I introduced Dimitri, and he does live in Southwest Florida. And I'm in Southwest Florida as well. So we have some tropical waters here. We have the Florida Keys and the coral reefs down there. So I just want to give Dimitri the opportunity, Nury, if he has any questions for you, because he also does a lot of work in the ocean as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey. So yeah, I do have a question for you, Nury. As we talked about when Casey was introducing me, I have my organization that's really focused on plastic pollution and raising awareness about a very specific source of plastic pollution. And I was kind of wondering, like, how much, when you're doing your research, how often do you come across pollution, particularly plastic pollution, and like, what kind of effect does that have on the coral reefs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's actually interesting, the closer the reefs are often to the mainland, are where we see kind of the worst effects of things. So, you might just see random things like tires or random stuff like that. So often the reefs that are closer to land look the worst. And you can kind of see a gradient as farther and farther you get from the mainland where humans live, that the reefs look a little better. Mm-hmm. I haven't, in my time in Maria, I haven't seen a ton of plastic pollution, but that could also be I'm working a little bit farther off the reefs, mm-hmm. where there's less, I could say human impacts. There's still human impacts like fishing. But yeah, plastic pollution, I think, is a problem worldwide.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, so now I think we're going to get back to our slides here. And what kind of advice do you have? We'll get back to the advice for young students who would like to get into a field similar to what you have done.
Yeah, definitely. So just from my experience, when you're going through the process of applying to college, even navigating college, and eventually if you want to pursue graduate school, it can be a stressful time. And especially if you feel like you may look different than other people in your field, or you have a different background. And I just want to remind everyone to not question your worth during this process, because you are qualified to be there. And I totally understand if you do go through those feelings. I also recommend seeking mentors that will point you in the right direction. The mentors I had at UCLA really opened the doors for me for marine science, and they really care because they've gone through this too. They know how hard it is. And I also recommend getting involved by doing volunteering and internships. Not only is this a great way to get experience and meet people, but it's also a good way for you to see the kinds of activities you do like to do and want to pursue, and also maybe see the things you don't like to do, which is actually really important to know. And once in college, a lot of institutions have some sort of undergraduate research center. So I recommend looking into that, because they often have funding resources if you want to do research to fund you while you're doing research. And if you eventually want to pursue graduate school, they often have resources to help you apply, which is, especially helpful if you come from a family where no one else has pursued graduate school and you don't understand the process. And they often have financial resources for the application process. And I also recommend, if you see someone with a super cool job that you'd maybe like to do, just reach out to them and ask how they got there. You may not always hear back from them, but some people are more than happy to tell you their story and how they got there. And this is also a good way to know what degrees you need for the job that you would like to do, because for not all jobs do you need a PhD. Maybe some jobs value more work experience. So it really depends what you want to do. And overall, don't be afraid of trying something new. If someone told me when I was in middle school or high school that I would be scuba diving and studying coral reefs, I would never have believed them. But I'm so glad my mentors at UCLA gave me the opportunity to get involved in marine science. And I'm glad that I did that, even despite like remembering how scared I was to go diving for the first time and do all these new things. And so, yeah, just really don't be afraid of trying something new because it can really change your life.
Great advice. All right, so now we're going to get back to what I was saying before, but here at EarthEcho, we believe that we can act now for a sustainable future. Can you tell us how your job contributes to a sustainable future?
Yeah, so in an academic setting, we often share knowledge with other scientists, but I think to really make a difference, we have to share our knowledge with the public and policymakers, and specifically for me, by being able to work with a national marine sanctuary. The sanctuaries often have councils where they have people who represent local fishing groups, local tourism groups, and we can work with them and acknowledge their needs and incorporate sustainable solutions. And my ultimate goal really being to prevent reefs from looking into something like this, where it's covered by algae, you don't really see a lot of other marine life, or also reversing a reef that looks like this and taking it back into a thriving coral reef community that supports a diversity of wildlife, but also supports the human communities that depend on them.
Very cool. All right, so now let's check back in with the Boys and Girls Club of Santa Clarita. Do you guys have any more questions?
Hi. We're asking if they have any questions.
Okay.
Anyone? Yeah.
So this isn't related to Visco Girls at all. But I'm pretty sure Dimitri was the one working with plastics.
Dimitri, are you the one that's working with the plastics?
Yes.
Okay.
So, have you ever seen like a turtle with like plastic stuck like in its nose or on its arms?
Well, that's a great question. So for me personally, my organization is very focused on this particular source of pollution that we have here in Tampa. There's a parade that comes through every year, and part of it is over the water. It's like a parade of over 1,000 boats that comes up this channel, and it's sort of become a tradition for people to throw these beads from boat to boat and from the boats to the shoreline over the water. They're like Mardi Gras beads, and they just sink straight down to the bottom of the channel there. And we just, we try to raise awareness about that and get people to, to stop throwing them. So personally, I haven't, firsthand experienced anything like that because I'm so focused on this one source. If they floated, I'm sure that would happen fairly frequently, but because they just sink right to the bottom, it's, maybe not so much of an issue. But I will say one of the things that we use, we have this underwater drone that we use to sort of survey the bottom and look at the beads that are sitting there and, how they're sinking into the sediment and things like that. And we do see fish swimming around them fairly frequently. We've seen a stingray, and crabs and all this life that sort of lives around them. And, maybe it's not having a direct physical interaction, like, it's not strangling a fish, but it's, leaching into the chemicals are leaching into the water and harming the ecosystem in that way. So great question though.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Nury. So
For Nury? Okay.
how many coral reefs have you seen that have been bleached?
So throughout my times that I've been in the field, in this past year, I saw some bleaching because the water was very warm. When I went to Australia, I was kind of at a point of the Great Barrier Reef where the coral bleaching wasn't so extensive. So it wasn't, I didn't see a whole lot of it, luckily, when I was there. Yeah, so the most I've seen was what I saw this past summer.
And I think I'm going to jump in. I think bleaching, and Nury, I know you explained it a little bit. The corals, they're a living animal, but a lot of stony corals lay down minerals. They lay down a limestone skeleton, and then there's the living animal that's part of it that kind of looks like an upside down jellyfish or a sea anemone. And a lot of times they're just, the size of the tip of the pencil, if not even smaller than that. And then living inside the tissues is a really beneficial plant or an algae called zooxanthellae, and they kind of work together, the coral and the zooxanthellae, to stay healthy. And when corals get really stressed out, Nury mentioned warm water. That's one way they can get stressed out. They can get stressed out by pollution. They can also get stressed out by cold water as well, cold snaps. We see a lot of that here in South Florida when our corals bleach. The corals will expel, they'll get rid of that algae that lives inside their tissues because they're so stressed out. And so basically they're getting sick. So if you think of it like if you're stressed out at school or with your friends or with your family, a lot of times we get sick, like if we're studying for tests or it's finals. And that's kind of what's happening is their little immune system is not working as well. And so that's when corals can bleach, and that means they get rid of their algae. And so in some areas, the algae will come back and we see the reefs bounce back. And I think in lots of areas where Nury has been, they don't have such dramatic events that we've seen like we've seen here in South Florida. And I know a big tract of the Great Barrier Reef is starting to see some bleaching. But so that's what's happening when the corals are bleached. They're stressed out. And sometimes if they don't get their algae back, they can even die off. And we've seen that happen in the Florida Keys. So it's pretty amazing. And it's awesome scientists like Nury that are out there doing this work to figure out what's going on and what is healthy for the corals and what is unhealthy for the corals. Because like she said, so much life depends on those coral reefs. So it's super important. That was a great question.
Are there any tips how we could make there be like no pollution and make the water not warm?
Yeah, that's an amazing question that I think scientists all over the world are trying to tackle. So there are some things we can address at a local level. So things like fishing practices, land-based pollution are sometimes things we can address at a local level. Things like climate change are things that, are issues more global that are they're a little bit harder to, to fix all at once. But I think you can do things, at an individual level to like help with mitigating climate change, little things like not using as much electricity, trying not to drive your car as much, all those little things that we've learned actually do make a difference. And also beyond that, elected local officials that care about environmental impacts are another really powerful way where we can actually make really great sustainable decisions to mitigate the effects of climate change, which ultimately will benefit ecosystems around the world, not even just coral reefs. Great question.
Is there one more question from the Boys and Girls Club?
Any last questions? No. I think that was the last one.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and a big thank you to Nury for appearing in this virtual career connection. You can keep in touch with Nury and follow her on social media at these links that are on the screen here. I'd also like to thank the STEMExplore partner sites and classrooms that have tuned in live today. Great questions, everybody. EarthEcho has some exciting opportunities coming up. STEMExplore will continue to feature women in STEM careers with our virtual career connections in November and December. Again, visit earthecho.org to see our entire lineup and register. Be sure to stay connected with EarthEcho on our social media channels and website, as you can see on the slide there. Thank you again to our wonderful STEMExplore mentor, Nury Molina, and to United Technologies for their tremendous support of our programming. On behalf of EarthEcho International, thank you for joining us and keep exploring.
Thank you.